According to the National Electrical Code, specifically Article 422.10 bone ground fault circuit interrupter, or GFCI, protection is mandated for all 125-volt, single-phase, 15 and 20 ampere receptacles installed in outdoor locations. However, this requirement has some exceptions. It does not apply to receptacles that are part of the service entrance equipment, a readily accessible single-outlet switch, a luminaire, or a dedicated appliance. Now let's consider the definition of a wet location as defined by NEC Article 100. A wet location is a location where water or other liquids are present due to regular or periodic wetting from sources such as rain, snow, melting ice, condensation, or irrigation. Considering a scenario where heating oil pipes are located outside, the question is whether a GFCI receptacle is required near these pipes. Firstly, we need to assess whether the pipes are part of the service entrance equipment, a readily accessible single outlet switch, a luminaire, or a dedicated appliance. If they do not fall into any of these categories, then the GFCI protection requirement outlined in NEC Article 422.10 bone would initially seem to apply. Secondly, we must determine if the location of the heating oil pipes qualifies as a wet location. If the pipes are not subject to regular or periodic wetting from rain, snow, melting ice, condensation, or irrigation, then they are not considered a wet location according to the NEC definition. Now let's integrate these 2 points. If the heating oil pipes are located outside and are not part of the service entrance equipment, a readily accessible single outlet switch, a luminaire, or a dedicated appliance, the initial impression is that GFCI protection is necessary based on NEC Article 422.10 bone. However, there is an important exception. NEC Article 422.10b2 excludes receptacles installed within wet locations from the requirement for GFCI protection. Since the heating oil pipes are not in a wet location, the exclusion in NEC Article 422.10b2 would not apply. Therefore, in this specific scenario, GFCI protection would not be explicitly required simply due to the proximity of the heating oil pipes, as long as the location is not considered a wet location. However, it's crucial to remember that local codes and interpretations may vary. It's always best to consult with a qualified electrician or local electrical inspector to ensure compliance with all applicable regulations. Always prioritize safety and adhere to the most stringent requirements when dealing with electrical installations, especially in potentially hazardous environments. The presence of oil pipes does not necessitate GFCI protection unless the area is also considered a wet location. The primary factor determining the need for GFCI protection in outdoor locations is whether the area is classified as a wet location according to the NEC definition. If the area is not subject to regular or periodic wetting from rain, snow, melting ice, condensation, or irrigation, then GFCI protection is not required solely based on its outdoor location. However, if the area is classified as a wet location, then GFCI protection is required regardless of the presence of oil pipes or other equipment. It's also important to note that even if GFCI protection is not explicitly required by code, it may still be a good practice to install GFCI receptacles in outdoor locations for added safety. GFCI receptacles can help protect against electrical shock by detecting ground faults and immediately interrupting the flow of electricity. This can be especially important in areas where water or moisture may be present, even if the area is not technically classified as a wet location. In summary, the presence of oil pipes alone does not mandate GFCI protection for nearby receptacles. The determining factor is whether the area is classified as a wet location according to the NEC definition. If the area is a wet location, then GFCI protection is required. If the area is not a wet location, then GFCI protection is not required solely based on its outdoor location or the presence of oil pipes. Always consult with a qualified electrician or local electrical inspector to ensure compliance with all applicable regulations and to determine the best course of action for your specific situation. Remember that safety should always be the top priority when dealing with electrical installations. Installing GFCI protection in potentially hazardous areas, even if not explicitly required by code, can provide an extra layer of safety and help prevent electrical shock. It is always recommended to adhere to the latest edition of the National Electrical Code and any applicable local amendments when performing electrical work. The NEC is updated every 3 years, and it is important to stay informed of any changes or revisions to the code. In addition to the specific requirements for GFCI protection in outdoor locations, the NEC also contains general requirements for the installation of receptacles. These requirements cover topics such as the type of receptacle to be used, the spacing of receptacles, and the grounding of receptacles. It is important to be familiar with these general requirements as well as the specific requirements for GFCI protection when installing receptacles. When working with electricity, it is always important to take precautions to protect yourself from electrical shock. These precautions include wearing appropriate personal protective equipment, such as rubber gloves and safety glasses, and energizing the circuit before working on it. It is also important to use properly insulated tools and to avoid working in wet or damp conditions. If you are not comfortable working with electricity, it is best to hire a qualified electrician to do the work for you. Electricity can be dangerous, and it is important to take the necessary precautions to protect yourself from harm. Always remember to turn off the power at the breaker box before working on any electrical circuits. This will help to prevent accidental electrical shock. Double check that the power is off by using a non-contact voltage tester. This tool will alert you if there is still electricity flowing through the wires. Never assume that the power is off just because you flipped a switch. Always verify with a tester. When making connections, ensure that all wires are securely fastened. Loose connections can cause overheating and potentially lead to a fire. Use wire connectors that are appropriate for the size and type of wire you are using. Do not over-tighten the connectors, as this can damage the wires. When running wires, avoid sharp edges or abrasive surfaces that could damage the insulation. Protect the wires by using conduit or other protective materials. Make sure that all electrical boxes are properly grounded. This will help to prevent electrical shock in the event of a fault. Use the grounding screw to connect the grounding wire to the metal box. If the box is plastic, it may have a grounding terminal that you can use. When installing receptacles, make sure that they are properly secured to the electrical box. This will prevent them from coming loose and potentially causing a hazard. Use screws that are the correct size and length for the box or receptacle. Do not over-tighten the screws, as this can damage the box or receptacle. After completing the electrical work, test the circuit to make sure that it is working properly. Use a circuit tester to check for any faults or problems. If you find any problems, correct them before using the circuit. If you are not comfortable testing the circuit yourself, hire a qualified electrician to do it for you. Remember, electrical work can be dangerous if not done properly. Always take the necessary precautions to protect yourself from electrical shock. If you are not sure how to do something, ask a qualified electrician for help. Safety should always be your top priority. Before starting any electrical project, be sure to obtain the necessary permits from your local building department. This will ensure that your work meets all applicable codes and regulations. The permit process may also involve inspections by a qualified electrical inspector. These inspections can help to identify any potential problems with your work and ensure that it is safe and compliant. When selecting electrical equipment, be sure to choose products that are listed by a recognized testing laboratory, such as Underwriters Laboratories, OIL. This listing indicates that the product has been tested and meets certain safety standards. Using listed products can help to reduce the risk of electrical hazards. If you are working on an older home, be aware that the electrical system may not be up to current standards. Older wiring may be damaged or deteriorated, and the electrical panel may not have enough capacity to handle modern electrical loads. It may be necessary to upgrade the electrical system in order to ensure safety and reliability. When upgrading an electrical system, it is important to hire a qualified electrician who is familiar with older wiring methods. The electrician will be able to assess the condition of the existing wiring and determine the best course of action for upgrading the system. If you are planning to install a new appliance such as a hot tub or electric vehicle charger, be sure to consult with a qualified electrician to ensure that your electrical system has enough capacity to handle the additional load. The electrician will be able to calculate the load requirements of the new appliance and determine whether any upgrades are necessary. In addition to the NEC, there may be other applicable codes and regulations that you need to comply with. These may include local building codes, fire codes, and energy codes. It is important to be familiar with all applicable codes and regulations before starting any electrical project. You can obtain information about local codes and regulations from your local building department. Remember, electrical safety is everyone's responsibility. By following the guidelines and precautions outlined in this discussion, you can help to ensure that your electrical projects are safe and compliant. If you have any questions or concerns, always consult with a qualified electrician. Remember, electricity is a powerful force that can be dangerous if not handled properly. Always take the necessary precautions to protect yourself and others from electrical hazards.